Good evening. Can we hear? Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I know. It's like, oh, we all good. Yeah. Everything looks really good. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to make this very quick so that we can get to our speaker this evening. This and every other program for Lake Oswego Reads is offered by the Friends of Lake Oswego Library. So please consider becoming a member or support them by donating books or buying books from the two boutique locations. So I'm very happy to first present Joanne Geddes, who is... She's laughing. A retired Lewis and Clark professor, and has been with the Lake Oswego Reads Steering Committee since the very beginning. And I always know if Joanne is on board with the book, it's going to be a good one. So I would like to bring her up to the stage to introduce Reiko.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Nancy, and thank you all for coming tonight. Really welcome. I see a few familiar faces, and it's good to be back again. As Nancy just mentioned, I've been working with for many years with the Book Selection Committee. This year, when we were reading through, and sometimes we read, the committee, not a single individual, reads up to 50 books or so. When I started how to read a book and saw that one of the settings within the book was in prison with the book club, if you've read the book, I immediately thought of a colleague of mine, because one of my former colleague, because I'm emerita, but one of the responsibilities I've held on the selection committee is to be a liaison with Lewis and Clark College. And some of you who have been coming for many years know that many times faculty, students, and members of the Lewis and Clark community come to contribute, and Lake Oswego Reads has come to the campus. So I became involved when when Lake Oswego Reads was seeking to bring Rwandan students in to talk about a book that we had read that year. And I've been involved ever since because it's such a great connection. So I'm reading how to read a book, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope the selection committee chooses this book because I know of someone who could truly inform and enlighten us about this subject, about the prison system and what it means. But I promise you I tried very hard not to bias the committee. I did not express my opinion. A book should be chosen, right, on its merits. But I'm thinking I have one of the best presenters ever in mind that we could invite. I didn't know if she would be able to come. This is countdown time on campus, the end of the academic year, and a very busy time. But Professor Reiko Hillyer did agree to join us, and I can't tell you how thrilled I was. Reiko is a social and cultural historian of the U.S. 19th and 20th century. She received her BA in political science at Yale and her PhD in history at Columbia. She came to Lewis and Clark in 2004 as a teaching fellow, and right now she serves as department chair and associate professor of history. Her specialties include the U.S. South, African American history, the built environment, and prison studies. I've looked at her course descriptions. I've talked to students over the years, and I know that one of her major areas of focus is student engagement beyond the classroom. And she also tries to assist students in developing really a deeper sense of place. Some of her very popular, almost always waitlisted courses are Constructing the American Landscape, the U.S. in the 20th Century, U.S. Women's History, African American History since 1863, and a course I would love to take, From Stumptown to Portlandia, the History of Portland. and another course that I think we're going to hear a little bit about tonight called Crime and Punishment. Reiko has numerous scholarly publications. We wouldn't have any time left for her to speak if I listed them all, but many on the civil rights movement, on public memory, on community policing in New York City, and of note, influenced by her work teaching in the Inside Out prison exchange program that we're going to talk about tonight. She published just 1 year ago a book entitled A Wall is Just a Wall, The Permeability of the Prison in 20th Century America, which is available here in this library. And this book traces the decline of practices that used to, in the past, connect incarcerated people much more regularly with the outside world, with the free world. It's a book about clemency and a truly enlightening and fascinating read, I think. And of note, again, is that this book is right now a finalist for the Oregon Book Award. So we're soon going to find out the results. When I was looking at some of the bio information on the website, the homepage for the faculty at Lewis and Clark, her page on the history department, I came across, and I want to just tell you this so I don't forget at the end if this is okay, but there are links to interviews recently done with CNN, Amanpour, with NPR. There's a blog that's fascinating. I was listening to it while I was chopping vegetables, and I went back and listened a second time. There's a link to an op-ed column in the Boston Globe, and a little bit of really exciting news that you heard first right here, because this has just happened. This past week at the Aspen Short Film Festival, a film entitled Classroom 4, which is about the work that Reiko has been doing and the research that she has done and her insights, just won the Short Film Jury Award. So congratulations, kudos, and welcome to Professor Reiko Hillyer.
Thank you. I almost didn't appear because I've been really looking at all of your books over here, and I kind of forgot about my obligations today. But thank you. It is so lovely to be introduced with such generosity and to reconnect with Joanne and to be part of the neighborhood. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit today about my favorite class. We're not supposed to have favorites, but the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program, which is a type of course and a specific way of teaching and interacting that's been incredibly transformative for me and for the students and how I think. So I'll be telling you a little bit about the history of that program and what that's been like for me, and some of the things that come up in the course of teaching such a thing. And then at the very end, I'll tell you a little bit about how it connects to my book, which I can't help but mention, and I'll show you a short teaser for the documentary that is about the class. So the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program is a program that started at Temple University about 25 years ago. And it began because a criminologist named Lori Pompa had, as just a sort of field trip for one of her classes, took her students to Graterford Prison, which is a maximum security facility now shuttered, where her students sat in a circle and spoke to people incarcerated for very long sentences, many of whom for life. And it was a tremendous conversation, apparently, and one of the incarcerated participants, Tyrone Wirtz, said, Lori, you know, this shouldn't just be a one-off. This should be the class. Something really magical is happening here when we learn from each other and look at each other as equally valuable human beings. And so she developed this course called the Inside Out Prison Exchange that she took inside Graterford. And it was such a success that she applied for a grant, and the grant was able to help her create an institute that allowed for trainings that are now offered half a dozen or so per year, so that those of us who are educators can be trained in this particular pedagogy in an ethical and thoughtful way. And so I was lucky enough to take this training in 2011, and then brought that program to Lewis and Clark in the spring of 2012. And I came to this work because what was so extraordinary to me about the pedagogy was not just that it was higher education coming into the prison, but that the actual mode of learning was a radical refusal of the boundaries that separate people. It's an insistence that those who are on the inside have something to teach those of us on the outside, and that those of us on the outside are going in not to study the incarcerated people or to help the incarcerated people, but to learn alongside and with and from them as bearers of experience and wisdom. And I took the training, or became aware of the training, because I had begun teaching yoga at Columbia River Correctional Institution as a volunteer, and I developed a relationship with the administration there and felt very comfortable there. And I was struggling with moving here from New York City, and how am I going to put my roots down? How am I going to feel connected to this place? And the main way I figured I should do that was to get involved in the community. So when I began teaching yoga at Columbia River, it was really just a personal thing. It was not meant to be professional or academic or integrated into my persona as a professor in any way. But then I met up with a friend who teaches at Indiana University, who is a scholar, activist, yogi, and she said, if you really enjoyed teaching the yoga in the prison, maybe you should consider taking the Inside Out Prison Exchange training. So I can tell you more about the training and what that all entails. We'll have time for questions and discussion, but let me just get into the meat of it. So the class that I developed was called, or is called, Crime and Punishment in the United States. And this is my very first Inside Out class. Those folks who are wearing blue are inside students, and those who are not wearing blue are outside students. The friend who is in the front with green is also an inside student, but he is compelled to wear green because he had just come out of solitary confinement. So he is on watch. He's sort of on probation within the prison, and the different color alerts everybody to his degraded status. When we come into the prison, we sit in a circle. We sit alternating inside, outside, inside, outside. We always open with some way of connecting with each other, and we always close in a circle. And I'm sure it's not, any kind of profound revelation to you to understand that already by sitting in a circle, we are trying to equalize the students in the class. And the students are nervous, they're jittery, they are required by the program and by me to share only first names. So we have a practice of semi-anonymity. We promise that we are not in contact with the incarcerated students or vice versa during the semester, that this is not a place to create pen pals or romances. This is a class, and it has to remain a professional and respectful environment. And that said, a tremendous amount of intimacy and vulnerability and connection happens immediately. The very first day, we do an icebreaker exercise, which you'll see a little bit of a glimpse of in the film teaser I will show. And after we've broken the ice, we really set down to business. And we begin to talk about the history of the prison. As an historian, I do not take our current world for granted. What historians do is to try to make the familiar unfamiliar by historicizing it, which is to say, putting our current world in historical context and to understand the contingencies and decisions and constituencies that had the power to construct the world that we have, how that world is contested, how it's conflicted, how it's unequal, how is power distributed, right? But we look at that across time and we consider change over time. So I don't take the prison for granted as a natural thing. I don't take it for granted as a normal thing or as a static thing, right? It was invented at a particular moment for particular reasons, has changed over time, and we are in there to study its history, but also to place the individuals whom it most affects at the center so that they themselves can also contextualize their lives, not just as a series of poor choices, as they might say about themselves, but as actors in a terrain that has been constructed in many ways for them to fail. So we begin with the premise that everyone is more than the worst thing that they have ever done, that everyone's story is valued, that we can ask questions of genuine curiosity and braid together lived experience with scholarly knowledge. So after we've broken the ice, I put this quote up on the board. Is it surprising that prisons resemble factories, schools, barracks, hospitals, which all resemble prisons? We begin with this quote, and I believe the short conversation about this quote may even be in the teaser. I don't think so. I'm not sure. So I don't want to give too much away. But you can imagine it generates conversation immediately. The folks who have been incarcerated can speak to this quotation through their own experience, and those who are more familiar with abstraction or theoretical knowledge or historical knowledge might place the prison in the context of modernity or discipline or capitalism and so forth. And so together we bring these different ways of knowing and produce something that's entirely new. We proceed through, in this curriculum, a chronological approach. I cannot cover every twist and turn of incarceration in this country, but I hit on a few key turning points, the inflection points that really determined a new phase. We talk about the birth of the prison during the era of Enlightenment thinking and revolutions, democratic revolutions around the world, late 18th century, early 19th century. Then we move into the development of the plantation prison as a response to the emancipation of enslaved people in the South. Then we move to another key turning point, which is the freedom struggles of the 50s through 70s. We often call the civil rights movement, and the backlash against that movement that really ushered in a law and order dialogue and rhetoric that persists to this day. Another turning point, of course, is the war on drugs, and that brings us more or less into the present day. I can tell you later what texts I assign and so forth if you're interested. And then in the last half of the class, we begin to discuss more contemporary issues and themes focused on the lived experience. Gender in prison, codes of behavior in prison. Last week, the students took a tour of the prison. The outside students took a tour of the prison, led by an administrator. And then we met back up in the classroom, and we asked the inside students, how would you give us your tour? How would your tour be different? Where would you take us? What would you want us to know? Right? We also talk about the prison economy. That is to say, the economy within the prison, but also locating the prison as an institution in a larger political economy more broadly. And we close with some readings about prison abolition. What is it? Let's think about it. What does it mean? How does it connect to our lives? Is it possible? So with this intimate exchange of, again, subjective experience and historical context, it became very clear to me that a final project had to incorporate these different ways of knowing, that a traditional research paper would not suffice, not least because the inside students don't have access to the same materials, they do not have access to the internet, they do not have access freely to computers, etc. And one of the main principles of the course is that we try to be as equal as possible for everybody. Inside students may have to handwrite their papers, outside students may handwrite their papers. Inside students cannot come to my office hours. Outside students cannot come to my office hours. We have certain ways of trying to promote equity by my going to the prison for extra times to give some writing advice and check in on their homework and all of that. But with all of this kind of unconventional learning of head and heart, of feeling and structure, it just seemed like a creative project, an art project, would be much more apt to conclude and represent the class. So in many semesters, I have enlisted an art maker of some kind. And in the year 2019, I got a little grant to, or no, I paid for this out of my pocket. I don't remember what happened. Anyway, my colleague and comrade Emily Squires came in to help me design and actualize a bookmaking project that we could complete within the class. So she designed a book that would involve the discarded prison uniforms of incarcerated people. And so you can see that this is the outside of the book, made from the jeans that the inside students or incarcerated folks are required to wear, with the stamp of the Oregon, DOC on it. And the book cover is essentially like a folder. And on the one side is an accordion that looks like this. I'll explain it in a minute. And on the other side is responses to the prompt, "How are you more than the worst thing you've ever done?" The title, "I Mend," was conjured by one of the outside students who noticed that the word denim was an anagram for "I mend." And he thought that this was not only a beautiful expression of what happens in the class, but the idea of scrambling, of sort of deconstructing and reconstructing pain into something beautiful was something that he responded to. The pencil in the middle, which happens to serve as the kind of binding for the book, or rather the spine, I should say, says "I mend" on it. So on the left-hand side, we have an accordion which unfolds into a timeline. Each panel of this accordion was assigned to a group of students inside and outside, and they were assigned a decade in the long history of mass incarceration, and they had to construct their portion of the timeline, identifying key turning points, key legislation, policy changes, identifiable moments that can help us, again, historicize, right? Cause and effect the rise of mass incarceration. Okay. On the other side of the accordion, folks constructed concrete poetry, right? Poetry wherein the words of the poem create an image that then maybe echoes or reinforces the theme of the poem. On the other side, we had individual pieces of paper, which we had students rip in class, right? Because scissors are not allowed. We learned how to fold and lick and rip. So we have slightly ragged edges there. And the prompt is, "How are you more than the worst thing you've ever done?" And people anonymously responded to that prompt with their own writing. And Emily and I typed up those pieces, and here is one. I am every piece of what I've done, where I've been, and whom I've met. Life doesn't let us pick and choose. Through every hardship, I have become myself. Human growth is not linear or consistent. It is not able to be dichotomized into good and bad. From mistakes come love, and from love comes pain and hurt, all mixed up in the never-ending process of becoming who I am. So this was a product that Emily, my colleague on this, made the outside cover, right, the dungaree thing, because it involved sewing and it involved a lot of time. But then on the inside, we all ripped and folded and glued and collated so that every single person could get their own book. So this is that class, the Inside Out class of 2019. Oh, look, I'm wearing the same dress. Damn it. And same boots, too. And these are my outside students about to go inside. So that book project was so extraordinary, both in the process and in the result. And the following year that I taught the class, which was 2 years later after COVID, I wanted to do another creative project as our final culminating piece. And this time I decided that the language of theater would be the most appropriate, the language of performance. So I brought in my colleague, Rebecca Lingefelter. Some of you may know her if you are familiar with the theater scene. She is one of the artistic directors of PETE, the Portland Experimental Theater, and she's in Third Rail and all kinds of things. Her? All right. So she came into my class to facilitate theater performance games and exercises for two reasons, and I'll explain some of that, give some examples later, but for two reasons. One is that using your body to communicate ideas is another beautiful way of engaging in the material, right? She reminded us that we carry history in our bodies and that our bodies tell stories. And so she gave us these tools of movement and voice to help us incorporate some exercises in class that would allow us to connect better with each other. Okay, in this case, a game where you're passing a sound from one person to the next. Okay, but also to create new ways of engaging with the material, because there's some things that the cerebrum gets through words on a page, and there's some things that we know through feeling in our bodies. And those are both equally valuable. And then the other reason was that the ultimate goal was to create a devised theater piece to conclude the class. And a devised theater piece, for those of you who don't know, is just the makers of the piece are the performers in the piece. And they create it out of their own experience, whatever mission or topic or guidelines they've created for themselves and for each other. And so Rebecca's prompt for their people's final contribution to the concluding performance was, what do you want the world to know about what you learned in this class? What do you want the world to know about what you learned from each other? What do you want to say to each other? So with that, there were exercises in class that involved the body in relationship to the text that we were reading. So for example, we read Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that book. If you haven't read it, maybe have heard of it. And after a very long, in-depth 2.5-hour discussion about this book in various forms and configurations, we concluded with what Rebecca calls the statue exercise. One student outside student, one student, inside student, and they're in a pair. And one is the sculptor, and one is clay. And they will take turns. And using only their mouth, the sculptor will explain to clay how to hold their body to match the vision that sculptor has in their head. And the prompt was, what does justice look like? What does justice look like? And then they switched partners, right? The sculptor became clay and vice versa. And the question was, what does mercy look like? Design a statue or a sculpture, a memorial to mercy. And after each group had, a minute to 5 minutes to develop their pose, we said freeze, and then all the sculptors walked around the museum of justice, to look around at what everybody had come up with. And then they switched and freeze, and we walked through the Museum of Mercy. And then we sat together and talked about, well, what does it mean? Why were so many of you who did mercy, why did you end up on the ground? There were lots of different questions one could ask about how, the choices people made and so forth. Another performance exercise or game that Rebecca had us do was the tableau. We read part of Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, among other things, and students had to generate themes from the book. Militarization of the police, fear, plea bargaining, families torn apart, whatever it is. And then each group had to create a tableau meaning a picture, a frozen picture using bodies, a scene, right? Could be abstract, it could be more literal, but the humans are using their bodies to make a scene. So, fear, go. They had a few minutes to design it among themselves, and then when it was their turn, they all stood in the middle of the room. They said, this is titled Fear. Okay, lights out. All of us sitting on the floor closed our eyes. They get in their arrangement. They say, lights up. They're in a pose, frozen. We lay our eyes on them. We contemplate it. There are gasps and giggles and sighs. And then when the makers feel ready to let go, they say, lights out. And it's over, and we applaud. And we talk about, well, what was it like for you to have your face down in the carpet, pretending to be arrested with your hands behind your back? What was that like for you, incarcerated person? What was that like for you, free undergraduate, to feel what that was in your body? So then with all of these exercises, we are not only connected with each other and engaged in the material and beginning to think about how to visualize ideas through our bodies and also shake off some of the mystery and intimidation people have about acting, and instead it's just like, we're all performing every day. Right? Everyone's always performing. And that's one of the things that comes up in our conversations, to the extent that incarcerated people reveal to us, out there, outside this classroom, I have to behave this way or that way. Or when I'm talking to my family on the phone, I'm wearing a mask because I don't want them to know how despairing I am, right? And so we talk about how we perform and sort of demystify that idea of performance a little bit. Then I and Rebecca pieced together the contributions people had made, from a script point of view, and we began to create scenes where students would develop ideas about how to, as Rebecca would say, get it on its feet, right? How do you move from an idea on a page to something that involves movement and rhythm and the use of space? On the day we performed our piece, the outside students all dressed in black in solidarity. We're not allowed to wear blue. We have to be distinguished from the inside students in every possible manner. we can't even use blue pens, okay? Because official forms are filled out in blue or black, one or the other. Like the prison can only use his black pens, and so we could, I don't remember what the thing is, but the fear of an incarcerated person forging some sort of document, right? So there's always this sense of like wherever someone will do something wrong and manipulate you and break rules, they're going to do so. So that's the philosophy. So everything is highly regulated. This is minimum security. It's not as regulated as other places I've been, but down to the color of the pen, right? So this is us getting all charged up and, kind of energized to go into the dining hall where an audience of incarcerated people, as well as professors and colleagues and other folks whom I invited, came to listen. And we performed inside the Chow Hall this beautiful piece that depicted in this scene Foucault's spectacle of the scaffold, someone being drawn and quartered. This was a moment when someone was delivering some spoken word poetry. This is the very end when we all stood in a circle and sang together. And this is just a beautiful shot of two students in a moment of connection. So this turned out to be a really spectacular way to conclude the class. And Rebecca kept reminding us, don't worry about that audience. Don't worry that it's not ready. Don't worry that we didn't even have a chance to rehearse because there was a flood and a lockdown and we couldn't meet, This is for you. This is for you to each other. This is a love letter for you to each other. But it was so incredible that my next feeling was, I want people who aren't in this class to feel that and see that. And so, beep, I invited her again. And 2 years later, in 2023, I got a grant from the Oregon Community Foundation to bring Rebecca in again, to facilitate in the way that she had before, to create opportunities for these building blocks and create a final devised theater piece. This is the crew reading over, the crew meaning the group, reading over the final script, looking at their lines. You can see Chiron has highlighted his lines, okay? And we performed it, this piece, again, in the dining hall, and it offered a tremendous amount of energy and love. This is us connecting before we went in. And you could see that the documentary, or rather film camera, is there because my dearest friend from high school, Joanne, was making reference to a film called Classroom 4, which is a short documentary that was made about this class, and hence the camera in everybody's face. And there we are, giving ourselves some cheer and bucking us all up to go inside. There were some Native members of the class who wanted very much to open the performance with some drumming. Here is Chops, who is giving a monologue about his daily schedule. And this was a piece that we concluded with that involved the taking on and off of masks. But what the grant enabled us to do, which was my vision all along, was to adapt the devised theater piece that the students had made in the prison for professional actors to be performed on the professional stage. And this was a process that took over the summer of 2023. It was a process of adaptation, of translation, of editing. How do you take a piece that was written at the end of the class by people who already have a deep connection to each other, that is performed inside a prison, so you can never forget where you are, right? How does that translate to an audience outside? How does the relationship get built? How do we know that we're in a prison, right? And so there was an adaptation of the script. There was creation of movement and sound and light and all of that, as well as the consolidation of 30 members of a class into composite characters of 6, right? Because we have to deal in reality. And we need to have a smaller cast, both because of management and rehearsal time, but also funding and space, all of this, right? So the piece was called I Think of You, and it was performed at the Ellen By Studio at Portland Center Stage in August of 2023 to great acclaim. And the play opened with video of the Inside students performing their native music as they had during one of our classes. During the summer, the actors who were chosen for the professional iteration of the play came inside CRCI, Columbia River, to speak to the incarcerated students and learn from them and understand as actors, you know, what do you want me to convey? What do you want me to know? Like, how do you hold your body when you want to sleep? If you're in solitary confinement, how do you spend your time? You know, asking questions about the lived experience so as to honor that performance or that expression, because one does not want at all to be extractive, right, or distorting. But the Inside students were so thrilled to have their stories reach beyond the walls. And one of our students literally did reach beyond the walls. The fellow with the black shirt chops, he got out of prison on the very day of the opening night of our show. And he came to Portland Center Stage, you know, grinning from ear to ear on his first night of freedom and joined up the Q&A. So I'm just showing you a few stills from the play, just to have us, you know, begin to think about how one conveys that experience on a stage with 6 actors. So the opening involved the moving of chairs and sort of thinking about making the circle and, you know, considering the nerves of that first encounter, which is depicted here. So the actors who are wearing blue are the Inside students. The actors who are looking shabby are the Lewis and Clark students, because that's how they look, right? So generally speaking, you know, Rebecca and the actors had to do this tremendous job of incorporating movement and choreography and blocking to create that sense of connection, but also contrast. They were walking in lockstep, and they were, you know, fumbling around, you know, all the different ways you use your body and space to convey the theme, right? They're in a circle. Here is the play within the play within the play, where the Inside student is reading the script about the scene of the guy being tortured in Foucault's Spectacle of the Scaffold, right? And here is a moment where the person in the front and the person in the back are just sort of reflecting in their written pieces about the energy in the classroom and how everybody wants to speak, how everybody's raising their hand, how everybody's leaning in to hear one another. This is students now play within the play within the play, writing a little scene about the Declaration of Independence. This is a figure of the correctional officer that we introduced to the new script in order to interrupt the beautiful sanctity of that precious classroom space. And this is one of the kind of, I think, really important moments in sort of the choreography of the piece, is that students inside and incarcerated people in general are not allowed to touch one another. They're not allowed to give each other a hug. They can shake hands, they can slap someone on the back maybe, but they're not allowed to hug. Least of all, visitors. And so there was a beautiful scene of dance and movement where the group keeps wanting to go in for a hug and they can't touch, and the movement stops right there. But on the very last day when we had to say goodbye, God damn it, we had to hug. And this is footage from the actual film. which we used. The film wasn't made yet at this point, but we had the footage. And Rebecca, my director, had this incredible idea of incorporating the footage into the piece. And so this friend is giving the final monologue, saying goodbye, in which he is quoting the writing of an inside student who had said, we're longing to get out, but you want to beat the doors down. Like you, Lewis and Clark students, want to come inside and be with us. And this world that we've created demonstrates that this is a world that can exist if you make it, right? And that even though the class is over, Ben said, I'm paraphrasing, what's happened is not over because we're carrying the experience inside us and what we've learned from each other. And you, Lewis and Clark students, will carry it with you in how you learn and how you speak truth to power. And we inside are going to just keep mentoring and keep doing what we can do to lift each other up. In the lobby of the theater, my admin assistant who was attached to this project had this brilliant idea of putting postcards on the wall. Each of those postcards says on the front, on the orange side, "I think of you," which is the title of the play. It emerged from some writing by an outside student who her contribution was sort of a diary notating all of the moments in the day when she thought of the students inside. "I'm stuck in traffic. I think of you," because you'd give anything to be stuck in traffic right now, right? "I'm going to the airport to pick up my boyfriend's parents. I get to see them whenever I want. I think of you." So the idea of this postcard display was that people in the audience would write on the back of the postcard something to one of the incarcerated authors of the piece. And as they did so, we turned the postcards over until the wall was turned inside out, as it were. And here are a couple of the results. "I think of you," this is from the audience, right? We don't know who it is. "I think of you when I lay me down to sleep, and I do not dream of freedom, but I should. I should dream of it for you. I think of you when I get angry with a family member, then remember that I have a family, however flawed. I think of you when the crows yell at me. They know your story. They shout at me to remember you." And then this one, I love this little drawing, "Sending my thoughts to you from Portland Center Stage." So 2 final points here. One is, this is my book. And I'm showing it here because the class really did inspire the book. The book is a history of the decline of practices that used to connect incarcerated people to the outside much more frequently. It turns out that prisons have not only gotten larger and sentences have not only gotten longer, but the kind of contact or permeability between the inside and outside has diminished dramatically. Clemency and its decline is 1/3 of the book. The second third of the book is about the rise and fall of conjugal and family visits. And the third third of the book is about the rise and fall of furlough. Right? In the 1950s and 60s, people from a Louisiana prison could leave and go to a debating championship at a local high school. A group of musicians from Angola Penitentiary played at a high school prom in 1956. 1956. Okay? So progress does not move in a straight line. So the last thing that I'm going to do now is just show you a little teaser from the documentary. And I realize that there's not tons of time for questions, but that's just going to have to be how it is. Oh, wait, Alt-Tab. Alt-Tab. Oh, I can't. Ah, no. Alt-Tab. Is it behind me? Oh, it is. Okay, I'm not seeing it on the screen here. Okay, sorry. Okay, this is just 3 minutes, so I hope you'll indulge me. I think it's nice to be able to, after all of that, just see what it's like in the flesh. I don't know about volume. We'll see. Okay, I've got all my handouts. I've got name tags. I'm wearing a non-underwire bra just in case. Okay. You have to think really far ahead when you're going into a prison because you can't, there are things you can bring, things you can't bring. We can't leave once we're there. So the inside students, there are 14 of them, and they're, you know, they're a little scared. Okay, pull. The goal of this dialogue is not to persuade or convince or debate. Okay, the goal of this dialogue is to listen deeply to each person's experience.
The cruel reality is that we're stuffed in little areas and we live out our days like that.
There's a great deal of desensitization that comes with doing time, and it starts to take effect after a while.
For the next minute, just write down some reactions to that quote. However you want, you write full sentences, single words, stream of consciousness, circles and arrows.
Mercy is most powerful when it's given to the undeserving, and it breaks the cycle of victimhood and victimization, and that was just such a powerful line to me.
There's a picture of me and my Raggedy Andy doll that I couldn't go to sleep without until I was like 12 or 13, and then going to jail at 14, like where to go from being a kid to going to prison.
So much crime is financial crime, is crime of poverty, and it's infuriating that instead we're imprisoning people who don't need to be imprisoned.
My biggest thing that I'm fighting right now is knowing that it's okay to start over, that it's okay for change.
This class, even though we all look forward to it and really value it, it is very hard. The work that we're doing here is oftentimes witnessing other people's pain and suffering that they're going through.
As much as I despise the setting wholeheartedly, I do enjoy seeing everyone again.
And the bravery that it takes to come in and sit here and talk with us has been astounding to me. And I don't feel like an animal in a cage here. I feel like a human, and that is something that is very underestimated in prison.
All right, so that's what I got. We have a little time for questions. Literally, very little time, but I'm here for it.
How are the prisoners chosen to be in that program?
That's a great question. How are the prisoners chosen to be in that program? So there are some very basic eligibility requirements, one of which is that they have to be serving a sentence that's long enough that they can finish out the class, just when are they getting out, and they can't miss half the class. Secondly, they have to have a GED or have graduated high school. Thirdly, they have to not be exhibiting any predatory behavior currently. And the inside liaison whom I have, who is the corrections rehabilitation manager, his name is James Hanley, He is my liaison and advocate and hustler on the inside, and he knows everybody very well. He knows who's coming into the prison. He knows their skills, their outlook, their capacity, their aspirations, and he will identify people and recruit them and encourage them. But there's also a call, an open call for people who want to request to be in the class to do so, and then he screens them for me. I used to interview everybody on the inside too, and it's just too time consuming, and he's willing to do it, so so I let him do it. Yes, back there.
Wait, hang on a second.
How many of these groups have I done? I'm repeating it just for the audience, but also for the streaming audience. I'm so fancy. I'm streaming. Hello. The groups, let's see, 2012 was my first year, and I've done it every other year. So maybe 8. I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but mostly, more or less every other year. 1 year was twice in a row. 1 year the thing was canceled because of COVID, but like roughly between 5 and 10 groups. And I should say that some of the inside students have become my teaching assistants. We got a wonderful grant from the Northwest 5 Consortium for Community Engagement. This is a collaboration among colleges that are trying to do what we're calling community engaged work. And we got a grant from them. Keep it in mind if you want to look for where to, support. We can now pay the TAs a minimum wage. They are required by law, incarcerated people in Oregon, to work. They get something like 10 to 25 cents an hour. So to be able to get paid a living wage that they can save and have credentials and recommendations and experience is fantastic. And this is possible now because we are running more and more classes. I'm now no longer the only one doing it. We got a different grant to train more faculty. So now there's one course every semester. It used to be only me for a decade. Now it's Jerry Harp is teaching a poetry class. Drew Donovan is teaching a studio art class. Molly Robinson Kelly is teaching a world literature class. Anyway, so it's just to say that there are now enough inside students who will take in more than one, and the professor who's teaching the class can keep their eye out. Oh, that Fred is really, really on it. I recommend Fred to you, Reiko, as the TA for next semester, and so that's how that works. Yes. Yes. Yes.
How often did your classroom meet during the week?
Yes, the class meets once a week on Friday for 3 hours. And the reason for that is, of course, the travel time. We don't want to be meeting for a shorter period multiple times a week because it takes a while for everybody who's Lewis and Clark to get there. But also because the nature of the connection and conversation, it really works to have a longer class period, and we have a break halfway through. Yeah.
The undergraduates, surely you're getting a grade for this, or how did you?
Everybody gets a grade. That's a great question. And a complicated answer that I may not be able to satisfy in this short time. But of course they have to be graded because that's the world we live in. And the inside students also are graded. They can opt to get college credit. Thank you, Lewis and Clark. They get 4 credits, 4 college credits for one class. One of my students, James, who is now my TA, now has he's taken every single one since the last time I taught it, so he has, 16, 20 credits, something like this. The grading is tricky because people are at different levels, and yet it's a Lewis and Clark class with Lewis and Clark grades, and you want it to have some integrity. So I give tons of feedback on written work. I hope that people will revise their work maybe more than I might ask them to in a typical class. I go in to offer some writing workshops. But what I've done this year for the first time is I've actually reduced the number of analytical academic essays and added a creative response piece, which is allowing for a little bit more freedom, and in terms of grading, just puts people more on an even playing field. And the second thing I've done, which I really like, is that whichever they have, a creative or an analytical essay, they not only have to cite the readings, but they have to cite each other. Every paper has to have a quotation from another student in the class to demonstrate that they've done the listening. And it's just been really remarkable, because you can see, exactly what I was hoping from the class, which is sort of, bringing together these different forms of knowledge and how those types of knowledge can inform each other. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna cut it off just so we respect Reiko's time. But can I get a huge round of applause for Reiko Hillyer?
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm around for a couple more minutes as I get myself together. So if you have any questions, you can certainly introduce yourself. But Joanne has also graciously offered me a ride home, right? So we don't want to hold her up either. Thank you so much for your attention and interest. Oh, and so the film you just saw the teaser for premiered at the Aspen Short Fest. And we're applying to other festivals, and we're hoping there'll be a screening in Portland. We're also hoping to get distribution through a streaming platform, but that's like, pie in the sky, fantasy world kind of thing. And if that doesn't work, it'll just be available on YouTube and Vimeo. So keep your eyes peeled, as my dad used to say. All right. Thank you.
Add that truly, if you want to get Reiko's insights on the system clemency, the evolution of what's happened, go to the Lewis and Clark website, her homepage, and get those links, because you'll get lots more history and discussion of your book. And I found that extremely fascinating. We didn't have time tonight to talk about all of that, but it's very informative. So those links to the CNN and the NPR interviews are there, and they're not long, but very informative. So just wanted to remind you.
I would love it if you went to Duke University Press, which is to publish the book. But, obviously you got to do what you got to do. I think that would be the best. And otherwise, it's just, however you go. Thank you. But the CNN interview is like 17 minutes, and there's an NPR Dallas, which is like 45 minutes. I'm so honored to be able to do that. And it's just an overview of the book, so if you wanted a, cheat sheet. They are, if you go to
you for getting her here and what a treat that was. She's so good. I mean, I was like, again,
I knew.
every
I knew
time
she
Lewis and Clark champion her, I'm like, I wish I was in
Well,
school.
there have been a few that have made me very nervous. She's the opposite. I don't know if you remember Susan Rosser, who got here like 5 minutes late, and then nothing worked, and she was so discombobulated, and I didn't realize. But when she said she wanted to be here at 4 to 7,
Oh, I'm so glad you wrote because I was like, oh no.
and she had made a mistake, and that's all. I mean,
Yeah.
you can tell
Because
she's
that would not have been.
nervous about setting up. But
Okay, hang on, I'm taking that for a second.
we met a long time ago in the Karen staff. And
we drove back from Karen's birthday up in
oh, at the lodge.